this guy, Merrick Garland, and once again, no time available, but you can still get some pretty interesting astrological points here, to mention. His moon is going to be in Libra no matter what time he's born. It's either right at the very beginning of Libra, corresponding to 00 a.m. that day, all the way to 12:22. Now, what this tells you right away is that odds are pretty good that the moon is somewhere between 0 and 10, but even if it's all the way to 12, you can see that it's going to put it in the range of Trump's Access Hollywood degrees, because his Access Hollywood T made by Neptune, Eris, and Mercury, the earliest planet is just under 6, and the latest planet is about 9. If you then add a correction for transits, or even if you don't, just through orbs, takes it all the way to 10. So in other words, basically, you know that Garland's moon is activating that T-square, and therefore becomes immediately problematic for Trump, the fact that that's the case. But then you also see other problems in that you see, for instance, Mars, Garland's Mars at 23 Capricorn opposing Trump's Saturn Venus. And that suggests challenge. It suggests, remember, Mars is the first ruler of Scorpio, right? So Garland is defined in a strong way by Mars in Capricorn at 23 degrees, plowing into Trump's Saturn Venus, where in his 12th, the place of Trump's criminality. Alone on the Mars, you've got a problem. And then Saturn and Neptune are at 21 degrees Libra. So in other words, in his chart, you take this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, you notice the square to Capricorn, and you know that that alignment is really challenging Trump's Saturn-Venus. So when you assess it this way, it's hard to believe that he wouldn't at some point, get in Trump's face, so to speak, right? And the other thing is that people have mentioned that this guy is perhaps too soft to be a prosecutor on this level, but he's a Pluto square Sun individual. You see it here, Pluto at 23 degrees, Sun at 21. He was involved in really high-profile prosecutions, I believe in the 90s. I think he was involved in the Timothy McVeigh prosecution, for example. And not just that one. He's actually quite intense as a prosecutor. So the notion that he would do nothing with Trump's crimes seems a little strange to me, a little bit far-fetched. You notice that the Pluto in his chart, though, at 23 Capricorn, if you now switch to transiting Pluto and where it is, it's getting beyond these degrees. Like the last place Pluto will station is around 26. So it's starting to move away from these degrees, which probably will take some of the pressure off. But probably the biggest determinant in terms of looking ahead and asking yourself, okay, well, where is this thing going? What's it looking like for him as the months and even years pass? And then you'd say, well, Saturn transit. Saturn is currently transiting in Aquarius, so it's squaring his Sun. And this year is the biggest Saturn square period, because Saturn this year basically transits from about 12 degrees Aquarius or so. You get the ephemeris here. You see it there at 12 degrees Aquarius. And at the end of the year, it's at 22. It's still squaring his Sun. So this is the Saturn square year. And so there's no question that is quite challenging for any person. That's the bread and butter of astrology. I can philosophize about Saturn endlessly. I've been at this decades, and I continue to find Saturn challenging. It'll be an aspect, and I notice that things become more difficult. Now I am, in my defense, I'm a lot more skillful than I used to be in knowing what to do, and that's part of the magic of astrology. But it's challenging, and individuals like this who are in high-profile posts, they automatically connect to a much greater degree than I ever would to what I call the active side of fate, which I often say to people is no more than a quarter of your life, if that. I often say less. But where for me that 25% of big patterns that I can't control wouldn't be anywhere near as big as this guy. So point being, a Saturn square for a person on this level is likely to connect him to forces that are much more difficult to control. And so it makes for a tough year. But then you also know that if you look at where the planets are going, you see Saturn in Aquarius here, you know that in the spring of 23 it goes into Pisces. And when it goes into Pisces and leaves the square, well, it goes into a trine period to his sun the next 3 years, suggesting greater ease. Even if you say, well, yes, but when it goes into Pisces, it'll then be at some point squaring Mercury. Yes, that's true. But then it'll also be sextiling Mars on the positive side, sextiling Jupiter, trining Uranus. The main thing, though, is that the biggest factor in a person's life when you're looking at what is happening to them, on a big level, is the sun. You always do the sun. And so the movement into Pisces has to be considered a positive thing. And the thing would be, though, that by the logic of the fact that you'd say, well, yeah, okay, fine, but all that is well and good. Maybe he can't make a case for Trump. Maybe he gets stuck. Well, sure, but then why is his Saturn switching signs to a place of greater ease? I even look at this, by the way, in connection to the success of the elections in 2022, whether it's going to be Republican victory, Democratic victory, because my sense would be that Garland, although he's not controlled by the election in the sense that no matter what happens in the election, he continues to be the Attorney General unless Biden were to fire him, which I'm pretty sure he wouldn't. And so whatever he's investigating, charging, whatever, he continues to do the same thing. But you can only imagine what it would be like to have a Republican House of Representatives. They're going to start calling him to the Hill and harassing him and making his life really difficult, which to my mind suggests so much more like with Saturn where it is now, right, in square to his sun, but not next year, in the year after that. So I see this as a positive, not just for him, but potentially for the Democratic Party as well.